okay? 3, all right? Very, very few. That's fine. Most of us, that was just a quick test to prove that most of us have heard about Zacchaeus before. We have not forgotten this very interesting account. And it really follows on from what Tosin was saying last Sunday. Tosin was an ordinand, was here with us up until, I believe, 2017. He was here with his wife, Angela. They returned to preach. And you can find his sermon on the church webpage in terms of all the recordings about sermons. And he was talking about being welcome. And it really just struck me that here, following Sunday, we looking at this account where this man, this strange outsider, quote unquote, was actually welcome. A quick word about tax collectors. It's amazing how, or perhaps quite interesting, about how that's the description that we have at the head of this reading. Zacchaeus, the tax collector. You might want to ask, what's wrong with being a tax collector? What's wrong with working for HMRC, one might say? What's wrong in terms of, being an accountant? I think it would escape your notice that, or your attention, that tax collectors were doing a job for the government. Tax collectors were appointed to collect money. And they collected money and submitted money to their employer, to the government. But the way the system worked, they were allowed to overcharge and to keep the profits for themselves. It's a bit like needing to submit a certain amount each month or on a regular basis, and anything above that is yours. Could you imagine? You're only asked to submit maybe £10, and you can work up to about £100, £90 becomes yours. And of course, this was quite a very common practice. One of the reasons why wherever you see tax collectors in the Bible, they always seem to be on the same rank or on the same level as sinners, because they were despised. They were hardly liked or loved. They were like lepers. And they were sometimes like people who would be all over you, of course, with enormous, power and authority to get you to pay your tax, but also because they kept for themselves all the gains and all the profits. And so we glean an insight to this kind of bad reputation, this poor reputation that tax collectors had. And maybe not perhaps without reason. Luke, interestingly, is the only gospel writer who tells us about Zacchaeus. Luke 19. I must admit that when I was a young boy in Sunday school, and that's many, many years ago, don't start guessing how many years that might be. The most important part of this story that really always amused me was Zacchaeus' height. He was vertically challenged, we know that. But I always ask myself, how short was this guy that he had to climb a sycamore tree? Well, I'm not particularly tall anyway, so who am I to ask about Zacchaeus' height? But he must have been pretty short. He must have really been, about down there, if not lower. And he climbed this tree. That was the part that really intrigued me. Him climbing this sycamore tree to see Jesus. You can see a picture of someone that maybe might have looked like Zacchaeus. And he's up there in the tree. But I think more importantly, and if my clicker works, okay, too fast. The bit here that really strikes me, or one of them, is about how Zacchaeus makes way he finds a way despite the odds. I don't know what your odds are this morning, but for Zacchaeus, the challenge was his height. For him, it was the fact that he wanted to see Jesus. And yet, he realizes that because of his height, there was no way in which he was going to be able to see over the tall, people and those who were around. It's a bit like being in a theater. Ever been at a theater where you think you've got a lovely seat, and all of a sudden, someone who also has a right to be there, maybe as tall as Roger, if not even taller than Roger, or maybe